Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging Automation and GIPS Compliance and Verification. I'm Patrick Fowler, President of TSG, and I'll be your host today. Thank you for joining us. We have a fantastic panel lined up with experts from Confluence Technologies, Axel Investment Managers, and TSG. By way of introduction, Confluence Technologies, formerly StatPro, is a global leader in data-driven investment management solutions. In today's sessions, we'll explore how automation is reshaping GIPS compliance, improving efficiency, reducing manual processes, and enhancing verification readiness. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session will run approximately 45 to 50 minutes with Q&A at the end. We'll have 2 live polls, a panel discussion, and plenty of time for audience questions at the end. We also have some handouts in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar toolbar. Feel free to go there and download them. Also, please submit your questions at any time through the GoToWebinar question box or chat feature. We'll get to as many as we can during the final portion of the session. And if we miss any, don't worry, we'll reach out with the answer. So let's dive in. I'd like to quickly allow our panel to introduce themselves, starting with Dina. Dina?
Hello, I'm Dina Hopkins. I have been with Confluence, formerly StatPro, since January 2008. My main focus has been supporting and implementing our composites clients. And prior to that, I worked at Frank Russell Company, BNY Mellon, Mellon Analytical Solutions, and basically ending up at BNY Mellon before joining StatPro.
Great to have you,
with the main focus in performance and attribution.
Awesome. Hans?
Yeah, hello, my name is Hans Grötsch. I joined Confluence, what was still StatPro at that point in time, in 2000, having been a user of the StatPro composite solution before that, as the German representative in an asset manager's global performance team. Since that time, I support clients in implementation of the composite solution as well as GIPS itself, and I do offer client and internal trainings on the products and on GIPS. For the last 5 years, I served as a volunteer in GIPS subcommittees. Currently, you find me in the GIPS interpretation subcommittee.
Great to have you, Hans. Dennis?
Hi, I'm Dennis. I'm a senior performance analyst with Axel Investment Managers. We're an asset manager based in Paris. We have a variety of strategies from equity to fixed income to alternative assets. We're currently a client of StatPro and we use the tool for, I believe, 15 years plus. And in fact, we just renewed our contract with them. We finished that RFP last year. Prior to AXA, I was with TCW and Western Asset Management.
Great, thanks for joining us, Dennis. And finally, my colleague, Ashley.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley. I've been with TSG for a little over 9 years now, and I'm primarily focused on GIPS verification and consulting services. I have over 25 years of industry experience, and in that time I've held various roles. I have been an auditor. I worked as a performance supervisor at a large asset manager, worked at a hedge fund, but the vast majority of my career has been as a verifier.
Great, thank you so much. We had a great panel here. But before we dig into anything, we want to get the polls from you. So we're going to launch a poll. And if you could take a moment to answer that poll. The question is, how are you currently managing GIPS performance and composite maintenance? A, external technology tools. B, internal systems. C, Excel manual processes. D, outsourced. Or E, not managing composites at all. And if you have any other comments, feel free to throw that in the question or chat box. We'll give about 30 seconds for that, and then we'll share the poll with everyone. All right, great response rate so far. Give about 10 more seconds. All right, we are closing the poll and sharing the results. You should be seeing that now. Very small on my screen. Hopefully our panelists can see that. Are you able to see that panel?
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
thanks.
All right. Any comments on that? Any surprises?
Well, it looks like about a quarter of attendees are using Excel or a manual process. I'm wondering how long it takes them to go through that process.
Right. All right. Going to hide that and move on. All right. You should be seeing our next slide, which is an overview of the technology powering automation in GIPS compliance. So I'm going to turn it over to Dina and Hans to take an inside look at the technology. Dina, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So we have been working with many of our clients to implement the following to help make their processes more efficient and smoother so that they're allowed to focus on and more on the analysis side instead of the data manipulation and importing. So basically, our clients would like to have the ability to just post their files to an FTP site, just have their IT team post them to an FTP site, and we automatically go out and grab them and then import them into our system. And so that they are then able to come in, they can see any warnings or data integrity issues, clean them up, run the calculation, and get their results. They also have the ability to create numerous net return streams, once again, to compare those returns and ensure that the most conservative return is reported based on the SEC marketing rule. As long as they have the ability to import their account level properties or details, as well as their time series needed to support their composite definitions or composite level policies, they are able to create what we call automatic composite definitions that allows them to basically run a calculation, and the system will automatically add and remove those accounts based on if they meet or break those rules. Yeah, they also take advantage of the flexible reporting tool to do things like generate outliers of composites so they know what to focus in on and ensure that the data, once again, is correct for their reporting. And then, of course, the ability to import any other custom return stream that is not readily available. So for example, you might want to import your performance-based fees or your actual net performance based on actual fees as an example of that. Custom benchmarks has also become a big thing as it relates to asset weighted or equal weighted best benchmarks, as well as the ability to fix weight them or switch them over time. And of course, importing sleeve level data or carve outs to support your sleeve level performance and make those sleeves available for composite membership. Those are the trends that we're seeing right now.
Hans, anything to add?
Yeah, just looking at the workflow, work order a bit. So from our experience, what we found most clients having established as the most efficient workflow is that their feeder systems provide files on the SFTP side, on an SFTP side, and the upload and import of this data is initiated into our systems. Then there is a step to check warnings and pending changes due to error corrections. For instance, implement your error correction policies. All this is based on data integrity rules that are reviewed and cleaned up post-import. Then next step would be the run of calculations, which is what Dina has already mentioned, where we make gross up net returns, net down gross returns in multiple steps, calculate all these custom return series, calculate composite model fees, and of course calculate the composites themselves and run the association of accounts to composites. Then finally, we may have post-calculation validations before we go into the end step, which is generating output, generating reports, which then again are dumped to an SFTP site for the final distribution, where only these validation steps, pre and post import, are the manual ones. The other ones can be automated. This is where we find clients adopting automated processes to optimize and stabilize their processes.
All right, great. Thank you very much for that. So before we jump into our panel discussion, let's go ahead and take another pulse. Why don't you poll here. Go ahead and take a moment. So what is your biggest struggle in managing GIPS composites? Is it keeping current with the latest regulations, justifying the cost of GIPS compliance, generating accurate results in a timely manner, no client demand, not relevant to your firm, or other? And if it's other, go ahead and throw it in the chat or question box and we'll get to it. Give it about 10 more seconds and we'll share those results. All right, closing and sharing. Thank you everyone for your responses. Looks like 21% data quality, 27% composite maintenance, 14% reporting and formatting, 13% verifier audit readiness, and 25% limited internal resource. Oh, that's not the wrong one, is it? I apologize, it's the wrong results there. All right, I'm gonna hide that and redo that poll in a minute. But before we do that, let's jump into our panel sessions here. So let's start with Dennis. Dennis, what drove your decision to adopt Confluence's platform, and what kind of impact has it had on your GIPS processes, especially around composite rules and reporting?
Well, like I said in my introduction, AXA has been using StatPro for many, many years now. Really, that decision is kind of driven by our size. We're a very large asset manager. We have over 800 billion euro in assets under management. So it's really not reasonable for us as a firm to try and do everything that's involved with GIPS manually, either in Excel or some other tool. So, and I think this is true of really asset managers, not just the largest asset managers, but really any asset managers of a material size. I think a good rule of thumb is if your firm is large enough that you can't name all the composites that you manage by memory, you probably need a tool that can automatically do a lot of the GIPS tasks for you. As far as the impact StatPro has had in our GIPS process, it really touches almost all of our daily processes. We use it to manage our composite memberships, calculate returns for our accounts and composites, generate reports, track error corrections, store our disclosures. It's pretty essential. I'd say almost as essential as like Excel and Outlook for us.
Great. Any other comments from the panel? Okay, we'll move to Ashley. Ashley, how has the use of automation changed the verification experience for firms and for verifiers? And what is your technological wish list when working with clients?
Okay, I think that in general, use of automation has really improved data integrity. It creates an environment that's less prone for errors. Also, there's typically more reports that support the verification process. And all of this obviously means much easier, a much more efficient engagement. As a verifier, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but there are GIPS standards for verifiers. And as a verifier, we're required to perform sufficient procedures, sufficient testing to make sure that the risk of not catching errors is mitigated to a pretty low level. And one of the criteria that we're allowed to use when we're making our sample selections is we have to consider what the system is that's being used. So every verification is and sampling size is supposed to be reasonable to the firm. So if we have a firm that's using Excel, that 22% in that first poll, hate to say it, but probably going to get a larger sample size over one that's using an automated solution. And if we run across errors during a verification as well, we may actually have to increase our sample size. So it really does improve just the overall verification process and helps us as verifiers do a little bit more efficient and effective testing and reduce our sample sizes. As far as a wish list for technology, I would have to say that actually really my wish list particularly is really about how that system supports my clients and their needs. For example, some kind of hot topics right now are sleeving, the need for multiple versions of net returns, and the better that system is at supporting my clients and the less manual work they have to do, the better for me as a verifier, for verification in general. I'd also say robust reporting that supports the process, GIPS reports, charts, and those kind of reports that also output easily into Excel or a verifier tool.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Dina and Hans, how are you working with verifiers to export necessary data to increase efficiencies between the verifier and the users of Confluence Composites functionality?
Yeah, we have a long history of working with auditors to build extracts according to their specific requirements all over the world, where we found some different flavors of requirements dependent on the verifier, also dependent on the type of firm which is subject to the audit, size of firm, and sometimes also some firms' policies. So we have a bunch of reports and continuously enhance the reports and the ability to extract data directly from the source. And we make those extracts, of course, available to our mutual clients to help simplify and speed up the verification process to make it as efficient as possible.
Great. Ashley, how important would it be to have an export like that, or how would it increase the efficiency of a verification, if at all?
Yeah, actually it would, and there's a kind of a few key elements here that helps out. You know, it allows verifiers to spend more time actually analyzing data rather than trying to manipulate the data into usable formats. It helps us standardize across all the clients that use that same system. And I think, you know, hopefully, probably primarily, it makes our clients' job easier to gather up all that requested data, which is a considerable amount that we're, as verifiers, required to request and review.
Great. So Dennis, just looking ahead, what GIPS tasks are you most eager to automate next?
I would love it if they could automate actual versus model net testing. As probably everyone on this call is aware, the SEC's latest marketing rule requires firms to test if they're showing the most conservative net returns. So essentially, is your model net return higher or your actual net return higher? Model side is easy, just take the highest tiered fee from the fee schedule. The actual, at least for our firm and one of the other firms I worked at before, was not as easy. For one thing, we don't have actual net returns for all of our accounts. I think this is true across the board for a lot of European asset managers. In my experience, or from what I've been told, it's just not as emphasized over in Europe as it is in the US. So essentially what we have to do for our GIPS audit every year is pull in a lot of accounting data, these management fees, and calculate it ourselves using Excel. If there was a way to automatically do that in StatPro, that'd be amazing.
Great. See a bunch of questions coming in. We're definitely going to get to those at the end. Someone made a comment, Dennis, great idea, that if you can't remember your entire list of composite reports, you probably need a system. So one of our listeners with that comment. So if you do have any questions, please send them in at this point as we are collecting them. So this one's for the entire panel. Talking about future of GIPS and automation. Where do you see GIPS compliance heading over the next few years with the rise of automation and new technology? I will start with Ashley.
You're going to start with me? Okay.
Curveball.
Excellent. I don't know. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. I hear a lot about AI these days. We talk a lot about it internally. I hear a lot about it, you know, presentations that I've been a part of. So I think we're going to see more AI, definitely. I think that, you know, in terms of where it's headed with GIPS compliance, you know, hopefully it'll evolve. Like Dennis said, there's some SEC marketing rule things that came along for, registrants that isn't quite fully supported yet. So I'm hopeful to see that. And I'm also hopeful that, the GIPS standards as they evolve maybe head more in the direction of some of the SEC stuff, new-ish marketing rule.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Dina?
Yeah, but we predict that with the additional automation that will allow our clients the ability to handle more volume, they will also be able to meet regulations, new regulations coming down the pike, which none of us has a crystal ball to see what those are, related to both the CFA Institute and the SEC. And so obviously having that automation in place will allow the ability to accommodate those changes easily. And the ability to easily distribute reports that our clients' GIPS performance teams are making available to them. So, for example, maybe a marketing user will want to get the GIPS composite report for composite XYZ as of December 2024. If that report is available out in the system, then that user will be able to log in and simply grab that report and do whatever they need to do without going to the GIPS composites team, the GIPS team, to get that information. And as Ashley mentioned, we do believe that AI will be able to help, especially with disclosures. However, there obviously will be some level of oversight required for that to ensure, and I'll let Dennis speak to this a little more, to ensure that the results are indeed what you intended for those disclosures to say.
Sounds like you're up next, Dennis.
I guess so. Yeah, I think that's an important point, the last point about a human being in the loop. I think in AI in its current state still hallucinates a pretty significant amount of the time. In fact, the weekend before, I just played around with ChatGPT and asked it, how do you run a report in StatPro? And it gave me what looked like an interesting answer, looked complete, but if you actually try to use it, it was incorrect. It didn't mention anything about Revolution, didn't mention anything about that whole interface. It was not useful. So I agree that AI will be a very useful tool and probably make our jobs more efficient. But I think as long as hallucinations remain a material likelihood, that humans will still need to essentially review and edit what the output is from AI. And so I think really what we have to remember is that ultimately GIPS compliance falls in the asset management firm, not on the software vendors, not Confluence, not ChatGPT, whatever firm we're using. If the software gives us bad data and we publish it, we're the ones that are liable for it. It's our GIPS compliance that's on the line.
That's a great point, Dennis. Hans, you want to add anything to that?
I think Dennis was perfectly summarizing all the issues. So it's
a lot of accolades for you, Dennis. So let's go back to you. So automation can't cover every scenario. How does your team handle exceptions or overrides?
Generally, if we have to override data, we try and do it at the lowest level possible. So what I mean by that is, if we have a composite that's generating wrong returns, we don't just overwrite at the composite level, because then we have composite level returns that don't match up to the account level returns if you try and manually calculate that up there. So try and figure out at the account level what's the right return, feed that into StatPro, and then recalculate the whole composite from there. That way, everything is in harmony, account, composite. Same thing for benchmarks. If you're asset weighting benchmarks or doing something like that, you just want all of your data up and down in the tool to be in sync with each other.
Great. Anyone have anything else to add there?
Yeah, that's a key thing, to sort at the origin of the problem and not just cure the symptoms. Don't correct just a composite return or a figure within the composite. Go down to the account level, go down to the portfolio level, fix it there and recalculate everything from scratch. As you said, we found that in the past often when figures were frozen or something like that, that composite assets did not match with the underlying accounts assets, and this went up to the total firm asset level calculation, which didn't necessarily match up with the underlying portfolios stored in the database. If figures were just corrected somewhere in between and not at the root, and no full recalculation from the beginning to the end was was performed. That's definitely an essential thing.
In addition to that, you want to be able to easily determine the materiality of those changes and ensure that the composites that those changes impact at the account level are in line and determine the appropriate steps based on the GIPS requirements and recommendations, whether it's an immaterial change and therefore you don't need to regenerate reports, or it is a very material change, you need to add a disclosure and regenerate those reports and distribute them to those prospects and clients that receive them.
Ashley, anything?
No, just to echo what everybody said, and yeah, I mean, as a verifier, you know, maybe I won't catch it, maybe I will catch it, but if I see something that's been corrected at a top level, my expectation is always that it's at the root cause and that it flows through any correction, and obviously that if there's an error, that it's evaluated against the error correction policies as required by the GIPS standards.
Switching to product roadmap and integrity, Hans, what inspired your automation roadmap and how do you maintain strong data integrity and auditability?
Now we've got several sources of inspiration for that. The basic inspiration, not only for automation, but for our roadmap in general, of course, is GIPS. GIPS is a standard, and the standard, it firmly screams for automation and standardization. Take away donkey work from users and automate it where it can be automated.
Mm-hmm.
GIPS requires documentation of the whole processes of all the workflow, which starts from the evaluation of your portfolios down to the calculation of the composites and the distribution of reports. So it all has to be documented. And the more you have automation in place, the more standardization you have in place, the easier and the more reliable your documentation becomes. The other inspiration, of course, is clients' needs. Also the fact that we have more and more growing clients. Well, data volumes become larger, history becomes longer. All these things are drivers to improve and increase the level of automation and standardization as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Also, requests from verifiers, of course, to have standard processes, documented processes, established processes, rather than just always ad hoc doing things this way today, another way tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Hans, additional?
Yeah. In addition, we've got now the move to Revolution Composites, which is now moving from local installations on client sides to hosted solution, and now finally to cloud premises and integration into the Revolution platform, so that we bring source systems and the composite solution closer together to optimize workflows even more and reduce the risk of human error or other errors creeping into the process in between.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some efficiency gains related to speed in the Revolution Composites platform because it's in the cloud.
That's interesting, which makes me think of a question that we often hear at the forum. It actually came up in the Toronto forum last month. We talked about attribution models and what people actually use within their system. So Dina and Hans, just asking you a question, what features or capabilities on your platform do you think are the most underutilized, and what could make the biggest difference for firms if they did utilize them?
The ability to accommodate the additional net return streams, meaning set up the custom field definitions, support it, that are required to support those fee streams, those net return streams, as well as the ability to distribute reports a little more efficiently.
Yeah, and I would add the automatic composite definition, which relies on all these custom fields and custom series, which are offered by the system. We still find many clients using manual associations. Either they run full manually associations where they just push accounts into a composite and pull them out again, purely manual, where at least they could easily adopt threshold controls, minimum size controls, delayed inclusions. All these policies can easily be automated, and if you go further, then you can use all the classifiers to build composites to drive inclusions and exclusions, which is not necessarily only for GIPS composites. We have a number of clients that build composites outside of the scope of GIPS, manager composites, advisor composites, client composites, all these things can easily be used, can easily be built based on these classifiers. And just to add more, to get more value out of the solution, you pay for something just for GIPS, use it elsewhere to leverage from your data work which you are doing.
Great. Well, before we move to the audience Q&A, and we've had a number of them come in, any closing comments from the panel? Nope.
Not for me, thanks.
All right. Well, I do want to just jump back to this poll too, and I apologize that we had the wrong responses there. So if you could just take a quick minute and re-answer this poll, we will share the real results with you. So once again, what is your current biggest struggle in managing GIPS composites? Is it keeping current? Is it justifying the cost of GIPS compliance? Is it generating accurate results in a timely manner? Is there no demand? Is it not relevant? Or something else? Give about another 10 seconds on that. Then we're going to jump into some audience Q&A. All right, looks like we got about the same amount that participated the last time. Closing and sharing. So thank you very much. Now we have 23%. The biggest struggle is keeping current. Only 5% is cost, 25% generating accurate results, 11% no client demand, and other. Let's quickly look in the other. I do not see any in the other, but all right. Let's jump to our questions from the audience. So taking it from the top down, this one's for Ashley. Ashley, what types of reporting outputs have you found most helpful for verifications?
There's a couple that just are always key. One is a good composite membership report where it's easy for us as verifiers to identify new accounts coming in, closed accounts going out, changed accounts moving from maybe one composite to another, or maybe moving to non-discretionary or vice versa. And especially for the full period under review, makes it really easy for us to make those sample selections. And I would say also another key report is that underlying account data where we can readily see account returns and market values. We use this for a number of things. A lot of focus on outlier reviews, looking for things that might have issues, don't look like the other things, other accounts. And also, for our recalculation purposes as part of our required verification procedures.
Great, thank you, Ashley. This one's for Dennis. Dennis, just so we get an understanding at the size of your firm, how many composites does your firm have?
We have over 200 composites and about over 600 accounts.
Great, thank you. And for Confluence, what percentage of Confluence's composite software clients are using Revolution versus in-house?
You mean Revolution for performance?
I'm assuming that it's for composites.
Okay. We are transitioning our clients from our hosted solution to the Revolution Composites platform on a client-by-client basis because it does involve interaction with each client and based on their demands on their side.
Not to forget that we still have a few locally installed clients with the old version of composites. So currently we have around still 30%, I would say, which are still running local installations, and 70% are either hosted or already on the cloud solution, and more the tendency away from local installations towards cloud.
Okay, thank you. So Dennis mentioned the SEC marketing rule that has introduced some requirements. One is for non-fee paying model fees be used for net performance. If a composite uses actual fees but has some non-fee paying accounts, can you calculate net returns using model for those?
Is that for me?
Yes,
or-
we introduced a feature for that in conjunction with the GIPS 2020 to generate model fees for composites that allow exactly this type of calculation.
Great. Dennis, did you want to add something?
No. So is the question just what do we do if there's an account in the composite that has that's non-fee paying, and how do we calculate it? Or?
Yes. Are you using models for those?
Yeah, so you would so all the other accounts, you would have the actual based off the accounting data. And then when you come to the account that's non-fee paying, instead of putting the 0, you just put in the model, well, at least what we do is we just put in the highest model fee to represent that account. If you put in 0, it's just going to artificially pull down the average. And so that's not a real accurate representation of what the actual net would be for the composite. So I think that was a good guidelines by the SEC on that.
Shifting to data integrity, how do you maintain data integrity when managing multiple source systems? Dina or Hans?
We use the data integrity rules that are built into the system based on the GIPS requirements and recommendations. If there is any data imported either manually or automatically, these rules are compared to, and warnings will generate if any of those rules are broken. The goal would be to have no warnings in your environment at all to ensure that data integrity is there.
Hans, anything to add?
No warnings is the ideal world. Unfortunately, sadly, not all clients are as disciplined as that, but generally definitely the target should be to have a clean database. And as Dina was saying, yeah, we have clients pulling from so many different sources. I remember a bank in the past which was using the composite system feeding from 13 different accounting systems. And you can imagine that this was not necessarily always fully comparable from the beginning what was fed in. And so but rules and outlier checks helped consolidating these numbers before they finally were aggregated into the GIPS composites.
How are you able to control this?
To control the warnings, the data integrity?
Yeah, I understand there's a feature in Revolution Composite that can control this.
Actually, in most cases, it will be outlier checks where you just compare in your composite or these returns which are supposed to be close together. And if they are not, then you have to go back to the source system and check, why do we have a discrepancy here? Is the portfolio not what it is meant to be, or is the underlying data, is there a flaw in the data?
Great. Back to our attendees. What is the best way to track GIPS reports distribution to prospective clients?
In our new cloud-based tool, there's ability to, anytime a user within a firm downloads a report, a GIPS composite report, it tracks exactly who is getting that, who's downloading that report, the version of the report being downloaded, as well as who's receiving it and what type of client or prospect they are. And then based on that information, an audit log is generated, and you can be able to easily see exactly who got that report and when and what version.
Great. Can Stat Pro Revolution automate materiality checks after performance has been updated?
We can generate reports that shows results before and after the change. That would be one way, but the best way is to do it when the data is imported to see how much how that composite will be impacted by the change. That's how most of our clients do it today.
Right. One of the big topics we've heard about is AI in use cases. So for Dennis, do you use AI in any aspect of performance today or compliance?
So we have a local version of ChatGPT that our firm has kind of rolled out as kind of a test basis. We don't really use it in our day-to-day, but it's essentially replaced Google in a lot of ways. You kind of search items on there. What's the latest marketing rule from the SEC? We kind of play around with it like that. But um, we're not really using it in production. I will say that I did see a demo of an AI tool that automated this marketing material review. It was interesting. It was very powerful. It went through lots of material very quickly, and it did things I never saw ChatGPT do, which was it would flag the items that I thought were in violation of a rule, and it would cite the rules for you. It would say, okay, I think this is in violation of rules 1, 2, and 3. And it would require the users to sign off on it. I think that's coming. I think that's definitely on the cusp of being rolled out, probably industry-wide in a not too distant future. But again, when I talked to the salesman who was behind that demo, I asked him about the hallucinations thing, and he made it very clear, like their firm is not responsible for if it misses. It still requires a human to check all of this and sign off on all of that.
Right. So back to Hans, how do you handle legacy composites in an automated environment?
Well, they are just composites which are handled like any other composite you create. We freeze the data if this is desired so that they just stay unchanged. So you don't have to worry about changing historic figures, which is especially important if you migrate from another system, from an in-house solution, where you don't want to change historic figures. So you just upload them as they are and freeze them so that they remain unchanged. And then they will be processed in the reporting as any newly calculated figure and treated in the same way.
So for those of them out there looking for a new composite solution or implementing a new composite solution, what are some of the challenges they might face and how can they overcome them?
Well, the couple of the main challenges we've bumped up against, and I think it was kind of highlighted in one of the polls, is availability of internal resources at our client sites because obviously they need to tell us what they want to do and extract the data and things like that, which leads into the next point, the availability of that historical data. If the account level data that is not available that supported what was verified and reported on historically, then you're forced to import that data at the composite level because the last thing you want to do is change that information that has been reviewed. And of course, once again, it comes down to the data, ensuring that that data that's being populated is clean.
I would add to that, having just done an RFP last year for this. There's the implementation side that Dina addressed, but there's also just the search, finding these companies that offer these software tools. That surprisingly could be a little harder than you think it would be. I'd suggest going to the GIPS conference. That's probably the best way to see as many as you could all in one spot. Second solution would be going to the GIPS website. They have a section on their website that lists all the technical vendors for software vendors for different tools, but there's some caveats with that that website is not very well maintained. So if you start pinging people off of that list, you're going to get some bounce backs. Someone doesn't work at that firm anymore and the firm never bothered to update it. And some firms just aren't listed there. When we did a search, my boss told me that, I wanted to include this. He wanted to include this firm, and I looked on the GIPS website. It wasn't there. I think that's especially true of non-US firms, technology firms that have software that they're looking to sell. So, kind of ask around your network would be a good idea. That, what tools are you using to manage your composites? Are you happy with it? You're probably going to get the most honest answers that way. So, also TSG, you guys have a website too where you list different software vendors.
Yeah. Switching to Ashley, you've been in industry and a verifier. What do you recommend for your clients when they're looking for a composite solution? And what other advice would you give someone looking for a composite solution?
I guess my first piece of advice would be look at as many options as you are able to see that it suits your particular needs. Definitely have an idea of all the things you not just need to have, but would like to have as well. I mean, one thing that, has come out of, I think, the SEC marketing rule that's kind of newer, I mentioned a little bit, is the capacity to sleeve. GIPS 2020 allowed for carve outs, but then the SEC marketing rule came along and was like, well, carve out composites are hypothetical. So now these sleeves where you can actually manage a sub portfolio as its own standalone portfolio has become kind of a hot topic. We've mentioned it a few times, the nets. Are you a firm that needs to be able to have those multiple net returns? Really looking at across a variety of different providers, and also having a really robust list of all the things you need it to do, but also want it to do.
If you had your choice between Confluence or spreadsheets, what's your choice?
Confluence. I love Excel. I really do. But, when I worked in industry, we implemented a system. We were using Excel spreadsheets and Access databases to make it all go. And we retired over 1,500 Excel spreadsheets when we put in a system. And just honestly, it was a big relief because you always have to worry about, errors in that many spreadsheets. So yes, definitely a system, definitely.
Great. Actually, have you ever had any clients that have 2 or more systems, and how does that work? How do you reconcile?
I have, but that's almost always only because they're transitioning into a new one. But yeah, and I've actually worked at a firm where we had more than one system that we had to work with. It is a lot of data integrity checks. It's a lot of oversight, making sure everything's flowing the way it's supposed to flow. And it's not, it wouldn't be my ideal solution. Once again, it's a lot of spending a lot of time making sure that data is flowing and data has good quality, and it's a lot of reconciliation that where maybe your performance people could be doing much more value add stuff than spending so much time on data integrity.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So that's all the questions that we've received. We really appreciate that. Let's throw it back to our panelists and see if they have any closing comments before we close out for the day. Panel? Seeing none?
Just that I'll highlight the fact that I recently implemented a client, and they actually said that the system saved them over 40 hours a month.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, that's feedback we got several times in the past. I remember long ago in the early days, we got some new clients simply by the fact that Excel, they were changing their macro language, but that was long ago. Not sure whether you remember these days, where all of a sudden all the syntax had to be changed. And some clients decided that this is the point to switch away from Excel spreadsheets and go for a standard solution and outsource these types of problems to a vendor to use a standard system.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session. A big thank you to our panelists, Dennis Lim, Dina Hopkins, Hans Grosch, and Ashley Reeves, and to all of you for joining us and for your participation and great questions. For those attending PMAR in New Brunswick next week, the Confluence team will be there. Please stop by their booth for a chat and see if they got any good swag, as Ashley likes to call it. As a reminder, this has been recorded. If you'd like a copy, please reach out to our friends at StatPro, and they will send you a copy. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of us directly, and you'll find our contact information on the final slide. So we thank you again, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, panel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
We did it.